Hello, and welcome to another segment of the Coatesville Area Public Library's Oral History Project. I'm Kirk Witmer, and with me today is Dominic Grady, someone who has been a part of our community for 4 decades now. Good morning, Dom. It's nice to have you with us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Don, you first came to Coatesville in 1961 for a job opportunity. But let's go back a little bit before that. What did you hear about Coatesville before you arrived here, and what was it that enticed you to come here?
Well, Kirk, I was born in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and as a seashore person, I really had no contact with heavy industry or that sort of thing. And as a child, I decided that I wanted to work in a business that made tangible products that were useful and helpful to people. And along those lines, I went to Drexel University, then Drexel Institute of Technology, and graduated in '61. But while at Drexel, I worked part-time summers at U.S. Steel's plant in Edgar Thomson, Pennsylvania. It was a large integrated steel plant at the time. And that's how I got exposed to the steel industry. I really had no knowledge very much of Coatesville, but when Lukens interviewed at Drexel, I knew I liked the industry. I came to Coatesville and looked at the area, and I think at that time they were just beginning to build the bypass. So there was a lot of construction going on. But I liked the industry, and I really liked the idea of being able to work in the steel plant, steel industry, and yet not be too far away from the ocean, because I like the seashore too.
What were your first impressions of the town?
It was a small town, surrounded by some homes, and I believe the first time we were here, we actually lived over in Westchester, and we commuted. And so my introduction to the town pretty much was just driving in the morning and driving home at night.
Dom, you've seen quite a number of changes in the management of Lukens over the years. How has that impacted on you in particular, and do you feel the company in general?
Well, they're actually, when I first came to Coatesville and went to work for Lukens, it was, as we know, in the early '60s. And at that time, the Huston family was very much in charge of the company. I recall one time we went to they used to have like a meeting in the evening at Scott High School, I think, in the early '60s, and Mr. Huston was up there, and he was making his presentation, and he had the podium had like a shiny Lukens logo on it or something, and he took his coat off and hung it over the podium, and so that the employees wouldn't be blinded by this by this thing. And it sort of struck me as kind of interesting that, when you have, it's a family company and you're concerned about your employees, you can do some interesting things, and people today wouldn't think of doing something like that. After, of course, in the '70s, the family influence was reduced, and there was a fellow named Wilson was the president at that time, and actually there was a little of a de-emphasis on steel making on the steel side, and on the town too, probably because the company at that time was interested in diversification and growing the business in other ways, and they bought some other companies. I personally had some trips to California, to Indiana, other places, observing these operations and trying to improve them from an engineering standpoint. So personally, I found it very interesting, and that era lasted until almost till the early '90s, and we had a terrible strike in the '90s, and at that time, Mr. Wilson and his lieutenants basically departed the scene, and there were a fellow on the board named Bill Van Sant became the president of the company, CEO at that time. And at that time, the idea was that companies should stick to their knitting, and perhaps not be making traffic cones and these sort of things, and get back to steel making. And Mr. Van Sant had an idea that an adjunct to that would be to get into the stainless steel business. And Lukens purchased a company called Washington Steel in Washington, Pennsylvania, and that became a major emphasis for us to get into the stainless business. And along those lines, we put in a vacuum oxygen decarbonization unit in the electric melt shop to permit us to make stainless steel in Coatesville. We put in what they called a smart mill in Conshohocken, which is called a Steckel mill, which is a rolling mill which rolls coils, and other investments. Unfortunately, in the latter part of the 90s, the stainless business became very, very, very competitive. Costs were high, and as you know, most recently, the company was in fact sold to Bethlehem, and now we're part of Bethlehem Lukens Plate. So we've kind of gone full circle, because Bethlehem is back interested in steel making and those kinds of activities. Also along the way, our just as an interesting point, we used to have our colors were black and red, and we were kind of proud of our black and red colors, just like the high school.
Yes.
And along the way, we discarded that, and we went to a blue and white design and a more, and dropped the steel from our title and called it Lukens Inc., the blue and white logo. But now with Bethlehem, we're back to the red and black, because their colors are the same as ours.
So, Dom, if I can try to sum up what you've said, it sounds like there has been a movement over the decades to diversify, but yet the decision then ultimately came down to do what you do best and stick to that. So we've seen a circle there that has brought us back to where we were 40 years ago, I think.
It seems like we've, in recollecting for this little discussion this morning, that we have basically returned to our to what we know how to do best, and that is to make steel plates. And now we're as part of Bethlehem. We also have operations in Burns Harbor, Indiana, 160 and 110-inch plate mill there, and also Conshohocken as well as Coatesville. So we're a major player in the steel plate business, but we are no longer Lukens Inc. We're part of Bethlehem.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you share with me your thoughts and impressions on what the future holds for Lukens/Bethlehem Steel here in our location in Coatesville?
Yes, everything that I've seen and participated in indicates that Bethlehem is very much committed to steel plate manufacturing in Coatesville and in other locations. They hope to grow the business. They hope to invest in the business. Everything that I've seen about the Bethlehem operation is that they're a company that practices what they preach, and they have high integrity. And I'm very pleased to work for them.
Dom, you have become a vital part of our community too, as well. You're a longtime member of the Olivet Methodist Church here in town, and you've also served on the board of the Coatesville Library back in the 80s. In fact, you were at one time president of that board. The library has struggled over the years with quite a number of issues. Share with us your impressions of what the library was dealing with during your tenure on the board in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, it seems like the problems at the library don't change. After I was part of the building committee, and Kurt Strauss, and there was a number of other people that were involved in that. And I think Kurt was the one that was the president before me, and then I took over. And I was there, I believe, for about 4 years. And during that time, we struggled. We tried to get the townships to increase their allocations to the library, just as we're doing today, I suppose. And some responded and some didn't. The library is an institution that I think everybody appreciates what they do. When I was involved in it at the very beginning, there was some discussion about whether they ought to accept the property which was offered to us, where the library stands in town, or whether we ought to build out along the highway someplace.
Well, let's talk about that property for a moment.
Sure.
There's a history there. Give us a sort of a litany of that corner of town.
Well, I think there was a tea room or something there one time, and it was a like a little corner. I won't say a deli because it was a tea room. I don't even know what that. Well, I guess they're coming back now. I guess it's a place where you go and you have a cup of tea and you talk to your friends and read the paper or something. And then it was raised when we got it from Dr. Margolies. I guess he had bought it as an investment opportunity, and decided that would be a good use. But, that's about all I know about it.
Okay. So problems with the library really haven't changed much in 10 years or so.
Right. The funding has always been a problem. The usage of the place has always been good. Every time I've been in there over the years, I've felt that they're really the staff has always been very helpful to people when they come in and try to meet information needs. And I think it's a wonderful operation.
Dom, with all the changes in management in Lukens, I mean, there must have been some downsizings that occurred. Tell us about that.
Yes, over the years, in the 60s, when I first went to work for Lukens, we worked in a building on Strode Avenue, and it was called the Silk Mill. And the reason it was called the Silk Mill was that apparently in some previous usage, it in fact was a silk mill. None of us really understood much about the silk business, but it was kind of a curious building. We were up on the 3rd floor, and it had a very high ceiling. And we at that time had about 100 people involved in engineering and industrial engineering type activities, fabrication engineering and some other things. Operations research was an activity that we were into. And at that time, everybody smoked cigarettes. And one of the things I remember is that as the day wore on, it had a very high ceiling, but as the day wore on, the room would gradually fill with smoke.
The smoke cloud would get lower and
and
lower.
if you weren't a smoker, you were by the end of the day. Kind of curious and interesting. But that was our location and activities. And as the years went by the late 70s, we probably had half that number of people. Operations research lost its influence. Other activities became less prominent, and we had to compete with what they call mini mills. And mini mills are an operations, a steel plant where you just go out into a cornfield and build the plant and just hire the minimum number of people you need to run the place. And we had, over the years, had to take a really tough look at staff jobs and other jobs, and over the years it's declined dramatically. So that at Coatesville now there are less staff people. In fact, I'm the remaining manufacturing engineer at Coatesville.
So from a department that you entered that was approximately 100 employees, it's now down to 1.
Well, just about. Of course, there were other activities that went on and other types of things like fabrication engineering had a large number of people, and that's an activity that we don't do anymore. But yes, we've tried to respond to the requirements of the marketplace in that way.
Dom, I can't thank you enough for agreeing to be part of our project here. You've given us some insights into Lukens that we have not had yet in our series of tapes, so we're glad that you were able to be with us today and be a part of this project.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.